So in this video we're going to be taking a final look at the Lionel Challenger. I did a video on this a really long time ago and kind of messed it up on the video effect of when I first got it. But this is the Lionel Challenger. I did a lot of modifications to this. It originally came with QSI sound because it was a model that was produced back in about 2003. But I since took that out and put in Tsunami 2. Also, it had all the LEDs replaced, and it also had the firebox flicker added. From the factory, it had a red bulb, but I go into a little more detail later explaining that. So, for most of the rest of the video here, this was actually made about a year and a half ago. This was actually the very first train I ever ran here in this room, back when the layout didn't exist and I was just running on carpet. So, some of the video quality is not that good, but I think a lot of the information is relevant, and I've had these clips sitting on my phone for probably about a year and a half and just never got through to finally making the video. But now that I'm going to be selling this engine, so this is kind of my last chance to put it all together and show you everything that was done on it, because I think overall it is a pretty cool engine, so I just wanted to get this out there. So we'll go on to the clips here next. Now we're into the meat of the install here. So the first thing you'll want to do is when you take the tender shell off, which is this piece here, this little plug undoes itself from the factory QSI board. But you'll want to completely remove off this factory QSI board, as well as this little reset switch thingy here. You won't need that anymore. Also the factory harness, don't need that, and also these I believe they're 32mm speakers. Some people would argue that you could reuse them. I really don't feel that you should. They're kind of old, they're kind of crappy. I'm not going to use them for anything, and also the ohms on them is really high. They're like 16 ohm speakers. I have no use for that whatsoever. So what I am going to go with here is, in addition to the decoder, which I already two-sided taped to the inside here, just doing two of the Lock Sound 28mm speakers. Getting a real light problem here. There we go. And you can see they're pretty inexpensive. The idea is to wire these in series so that I can get an 8 ohm load, which is good for this decoder. It's not a Lock Sound, so I can't run a 4 ohm load. If I could, I would be using two of the 28mm TCS wows, since I do prefer those over these, but this should give me the proper setup here, and we'll show the wiring here in just a bit. But the other part that you do want to, this is very important that you retain from the QSI board, is the connector here, which actually plugs into the back of the locomotive up under here. So with that, you can just reuse this. The nice thing about doing an install on one of these is that you don't have to take apart the locomotive at all. If you know what pins go where on this little plug here, you can do everything within the tender. So I'm going to go over what those pins are here, and there's 6 of them. So there's 6 pins that plug directly into the back of the locomotive. So starting at the left, what we have there is going to be one of the track power outputs. So you want to make sure that that also matches up with what's on the tender, otherwise you're going to be shorting out, because there's also a tender track pickup here. So I basically wired those to the same place as where this plug goes, so you want to make sure the power inputs are consistent. Pin number 2, which this is starting from left to right as you look at the back of the engine. So basically from here on over. Pin number 2 is the gray on the decoder, which is a motor output. And then pin number 3, that is going to be the headlight switch, or the switched negative output. So that will be the white wire here off the decoder. That's going to go to the pin number 3, again starting from the left and working to the right. And then pin number 4, there's a little divider here, which you can, can't really see it on here. I think you can see it a little bit better on the QSI board. But basically there's 2 gaps there in the middle. So there's 3 plugs on either side. You don't really use the middle 2 on this one. But starting with the next usable pin over, then that is the LED power, because all of the lighting in here is LEDs. So that will be the blue wire here off of your decoder, or what's known as the common positive. And then pin number 5 will be the orange, which is the other motor lead there. And then lastly, pin number 6 on the very outside right of the plug is the other track power. So there you have it. If you follow that, pretty much you can wire up any decoder right into this factory harness here, and you don't have to take apart the locomotive and redo anything in there. As long as you follow this, everything should work just fine. And I'll be able to show you here in just a moment after, as soon as I finish all of this up. For the tender, really there's only 2 wires that need to be used with this. I'm not sure why they have like 5 of them there. But This engine did come with all factory LEDs, however, pretty much all of them actually burned out. Not exactly sure why. They all have resistors on them, but for some reason they just all burned out. So I actually ended up replacing all of them. I replaced the two in the number board headlight, and both of the firebox lights actually burned out also. It's sort of a blessing in disguise because I wasn't very happy with the lighting anyway, so it's now brighter, better color. Also on the firebox here, they were just a solid red light, so I didn't really prefer red as a color for the firebox. So one thing I'm going to try, and we'll see how it turns out, is this is a 5mm LED, just the same as the factory one here. However, this one is orange, which I think is a little bit better color for the fire. And also, it has a built-in circuit board for flickering. So these here, you can't really do a flickering firebox because you're out of lighting functions. The cab light that's in here, firebox, also the number boards, they all run off of the same input. So unless you're going to repin pretty much or run an additional set of wires from the tender, you really only have one lighting output to work with. So because of the fact that it has to be constant, I can't really run another function wire up to do flickering LEDs. So this kind of addresses that issue. The flickering is built into the bulb. So pretty much all I have to do is solder it onto where the old one was, which I already cut off the first one there. And we'll see how it turns out. If it doesn't, then I just also ordered regular orange LEDs, which I did test those out, and it's a pretty nice color. So if the flickering, if I don't like it, I can always change to a solid orange. So we're going to put it in and see what happens here. Well, here we are with the blinking LED in there. And you can ignore this top part here because the shell is actually not on all the way. What we're looking at is this lower part here. I think it looks fantastic. Definitely looks like there's a fire going in there. So, we'll go ahead and do the other side and button it up and take a look at what the finished product looks like. Alright, so fast forward back to 2018 here, and we're going to go through the final run of this on my layout here, and we'll go through all the different sounds. And this is a pretty loud one. I'd say this is probably the loudest engine I've ever built. Definitely the loudest HO scale model I've ever heard.